Welcome to another episode of Exercise Matters with me, Randall Cooper.
And me, Mick Hughes.
Support for today's episode comes from Premax Performance Skincare. If you're active, you focus on strength, endurance and recovery. But what about your skin? Sweat, friction and the elements take a toll. That's where Premax comes in. High-performance skincare made for high-performance people. From recovery creams to anti-chafe balms, massage creams to exercise-specific barrier creams, we help your skin go the distance. Keep your skin as fit as your body with Premax. Available now at premax.co.
And support for today's episode also comes from Learn.Physio. Health professionals, are you staying ahead of the game? Learn.Physio brings you cutting-edge education from world-class experts in sports and musculoskeletal medicine. Online courses, hands-on practicals and expert resources, all backed by the latest evidence and designed to fit into your busy schedule. To be your best, learn from the best. Get started today at Learn.Physio. Happy Monday, mate. Good morning.
Good morning. It's good to be back with you. I'm looking forward to this topic. Do you know we're up to now episode 22, season 2.
2 for 22.
Yep. So we're doing really well. We've got another couple of episodes to do before we kind of close out this season. And then even though the research paper that we discussed last week didn't kind of say it helps, periodization works in podcasting is my thoughts. When you and I need to take a little break so we can get some other work done. But we're going to come back with a season 3 for sure. Season 3. Maybe make a few changes. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm all up for it. Season 3, they say you only get better with age, and season 3.
Here we go with your theories on seasons and how good they get. So
it's felt like, I'm a big fan of The Office.
Right.
US and UK. UK, obviously, 2 seasons done. Also, a lot of great British UK sitcom. Faulty Towers only did 2 seasons. UK did 2. The US, though, it cracked on for 9, but it definitely got better and better with age. A lot of great sort of, comedy shows, dramas, do sort of reach a peak, usually about season 3, season 4 is kind of like when they're really killing it. And then we just got to be careful just to, retire at the right time, mate. Hold on too long and, anyway, we'll see. But season 3, I'm here for it.
Well, we love objective data, and the objective data is all trending positively for us. We keep getting new subscribers, we get more listens, more shares. So to everyone who has joined us along for the journey, thanks. Mick and I get a real kick out of it, and as you can tell, we do it mainly for fun. Yeah, but there's a little bit of business mixed in as well. But thanks for joining us on the journey. If you do have any feedback and suggestions for us of what you'd like to see or something different in season 3, let us know.
Yeah, please let us know. I really enjoyed this season. I must admit, this has been great to bring some of the experts in. Season 1 was nice, and we were sort of learning how we were going to format and structure the podcast series. Season 2, we sort of got the experts in, called in the big guns from time to time. Not this episode though. Last episode you did all the heavy lifting, and I sort of chimed in and gave my 2 cents worth. And same today, mate. We're just going to cover a topic in the exercise science land, but it's just going to be my research review of it. No expert commentary on this one. This topic in particular was prompted from our discussion with Tony Shields a few weeks ago about rest.
Yes,
because he did at one point kind of hint at the role of potentiation of the muscle and the nervous system in your rest period, and how that can basically encourage your muscles to regather all its energy storage and actually be in a superior position to go a bit harder or faster, or jump a bit higher, run a bit faster after your rest breaks. That's what we're talking about today: Post Activation Potentiation, or PAP, as it is commonly referred to.
Or PAP. There's an E on the end.
PAP. There is a PAP in it sometimes, with the E being post-activation potentiation excitement.
Excitement
is how it's referred to sometimes. So those 2 terms you might read in the literature, and they're often used interchangeably, and they refer to the same thing. So that's what we're covering today.
That's excellent. I'm looking forward to this because it is something that I have to say that I've noticed anecdotally a lot. I have integrated it in my own program and also my patients' programs to some extent, but I've never really kind of dug into the science behind it and the evidence. So I think it's a great topic for me to learn something this episode as well, Mick, but also for everyone who's listening too.
Yeah, it was certainly something that I'd learnt about in exercise science school, and doing some personal training along the way, and it had sort of been, I was certainly aware of it. I was probably maybe a little bit misunderstood as to what type of muscle contractions will probably give you the best bang for buck, or so via plyometric training or heavy strength training as a pre-stimulus, or the kind of warm up, so to speak, or isometric contractions. Actually, I was doing a bit of background reading this, and the original kind of discovery of this neural excitement was discovered in rats, as a lot of great clinical trials are discovered in the poor old rats. And
The rats, yep.
They basically, created these isometric contractions in their hind legs, and they found that the isometric contractions actually provided, prior to a stimulus or getting them on the bloody spinny wheel thing they like to run on.
Yeah.
That isometric contraction gave them a bit of a boost. So that was the original, I guess, discovery of it. And it actually fell silent. There was some buzz about it, like in the late 70s, early 80s. That's when they started to know about it and see the neural benefits of it. Then it fell silent until kind of like the mid 90s and the early 2000s, where research actually really got, particularly when it came to strength and conditioning and performance gains, they really started to kind of rediscover the joys of the PAP, I guess, phenomenon. And that's where we've kind of land today, with a good 25 years of solid research behind us, and a few interesting papers too. So yeah.
The group that springs to mind most for me when we think about this topic for me is sprinters, because like you think about, when part of it's just the theatre of, like being an Olympic final or whatever, but then they're strutting around and striding and squatting and jumping and leaping and that kind of thing. And I used to think, is there actually a physiological kind of background and rationale behind them doing what they're doing, or are they just being peacocks and just kind of showing off to the crowd? And I think we'll answer that as we get through this talk.
I think we will, and we will. And the other group is weightlifters. If you ever watch, I was fascinated watching Paris Olympics just recently, and some Olympics in yesteryear, when these big weightlifters come out on stage and they do their Olympic lifting, and you see them set up the bar for a clean and jerk or a snatch, and they set the bar in their first one or two attempts, and they might lift a 160 clean and jerk, and they miss that one, like technically there wasn't there or whatever it was. They'll go out in the back room, they'll sort of get slapped on the back a few times by their coaches. They'll smell some sniffing salts. They'll come back 10 minutes later. They'll put another 10 kilos on the bar, and they'll absolutely perfectly nail the next one.
Yeah.
And it's like, how did that happen? Like, you couldn't lift 160, but then you can come back 10 minutes later and do 170. Like, what the hell? So that's kind of like what we're sort of getting at today, which is pretty cool. So the structure of today is sort of going to go from brief, I guess, physiology lesson about what it is and how kind of it is. Not a whole lot of time there spent there, but I wanted to go into some strong evidence and some systematic reviews about what PAP is, I guess, received and how it works within the body, and certainly look at some of the timing of it, and then dive into a couple of particular activities where PAP has been discovered to be really helpful. So looking at jumping and sprinting athletes, looking at soccer athletes, looking at middle distance runners, and then also to using, in recent years, they've also looked at combining PAP with other things such as BFR and caffeine. So we'll have a really interesting next 45 minutes or so.
Yeah, good.
The physiology, diving straight in, without getting too technical about it, and I certainly won't bore everyone with the process here, but basically the way there's probably 2 to 3 particular mechanisms that PAP is believed to work, and it's the first one being the phosphorylation of myosin. Here we go, can't even say it. Phosphorylation of the myosin chains within a muscle unit, making it more sensitive to calcium. So calcium's like a calcium ion is a really important element to a very strong and forceful muscle contraction. So doing something like a jump or a lift or like a squat or something like that is supposedly encourages the release of some calcium. It will attract the calcium ions into the muscle, so the The muscle will work more efficiently for the next upcoming subsequent rest once it's got through its rest periods and is believed to improve force production. The second one is mostly geared towards the second mechanism is mostly geared towards the improved and the increase of the excitability of the alpha motor neuron, which results in a greater neural drive to our muscle system. So it's partly the phenomenon, PAP phenomenon, is seen at both the muscle level, but also the nervous system level. And the excitement in both of these channels is where we know the benefit. Well, that's how physiologically these PAP benefits are seen. So if we think about it very simply, if we think about what PAP is, Post Activation Potentiation is essentially waking up the nervous system and putting the muscle in a more ready to fire state. So some people may refer to this as a warm-up, but it's slightly different to a warm-up.
It's different.
It's much, much more than just going out for a slow, steady jog around the oval, doing a few static stretches and a few body weight, lunges or squats. This is something that's entirely different. So importantly, that's warm-up still needs to be done. You still need to get the cardiovascular system kicking along. You still need to get the heart rate up and increase the core temperature of the body. You need to get some kind of excitement going, because some of especially the strength protocols that have been discovered and used in research in these papers that we're talking about, they're quite heavy loads. And certainly some of the plyometric exercises too that are encouraged to be done prior to your performance also too needs an effective warm-up too. So this isn't a warm-up, so please don't confuse this as a warm-up. Even though it's priming the body and warming the body up, this isn't like your standard 10-minute warm-up and then roll out. This is something that's extra on top of that.
Well, integrated with, you can do all that stuff to kind of get your cardiovascular system going, get your psychology kind of tuned into about what you're about to do as well. But this is part of it, that if you do it well, it can really improve your performance.
Yep. Very good. All right. So this is the first one is a 2021 systematic review by Garbasu and Santos, two colleagues, they're exercise science colleagues. And this was a systematic review and certainly the foundational paper that I wanted to use in this. So this was a systematic review of PAP in strength training. The authors looked at 17 studies in total. After screening 202, they whittled it down to 17 studies. And the included studies had roughly about 350 participants from memory, mostly male, and were trained. So they had 2 to 5 years of resistance training, and they were mostly in their middle 20s. So it's a pretty, skewed cohort, young, healthy males that are resistance trained. And they were looking at what parameters of PAP in a resistance training PAP here. What are the parameters that seem to give us the best yielding results? And so what they found here is that of all the studies included, if you're going to use an activity like a squat or a leg press or some kind of resistance training tool to get your post-activation potentiation effect, we need to go at it at about 65% 1RM. So like a reasonable load, nothing super heavy, but still reasonable as a bare minimum. But the bigger effects were seen around 85 to 90% 1RM, so a much heavier load. So that makes sense. Like you've got a heavy load, you're sitting under a squat bar, you've got a bar on your back, or you're trying to pull something heavy off the ground. To lift that thing and not let it crush you, you've got to get really focused and get really excited. So definitely that central nervous system excitement and drive seems to yield those better results. Obviously, some greater strength will encourage some of those muscle effects as well.
And sets and reps, Mick? Or just reps, I assume. Like how many, did they say how many you do?
There was a range of, and this is the beauty of systematic reviews, there was quite a big range. So we saw studies have as little as 1 set of up to 10 reps and 3 sets of up to 10 reps. So there's a huge range there. The middle ground was 2 to 3 sets of 6 to 10 reps with 2 to 3 reps in reserve as your PAP stimulus. Okay, so that's what they were looking at there to get some excitement before moving on to doing what it is that we want to do better at in the upcoming 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And importantly, and this is where Tony was mentioning and talking about last time, is that the rest period. So once you finish your complete, let's say we're doing 3 sets of 6 squats before we want to go and run. or we want to go out and maybe do a vertical jump test to test our power or something like that. We need to rest for at least 7 to 8 minutes. And that's what the recommendation of this paper were. So if we're doing a set of 6 heavy squats at 90% 1RM, we'd still rest for our 2 to 3 minutes. And we'd still like to do that full program, or those 3 sets of 6 or 2 sets of 6, whichever way you want to play it out. Then you rest. And that's where that potentiation kicks in, so that your neural system is firing. But this is the balance between PAP on a continuum. So if you overload the PAP period, so if we're sort of considering your squats as your PAP, if you overload it, fatigue your muscles, then the potentiation effect is going to dwindle. Okay, we're going to create fatigue. We don't get that excitement. But if we give yourself that nice optimal dose where the excitement is there, we give ourselves our adequate rest period, that's where the benefits are going to be seen. So it's a really fine balance between excitement and fatigue. And it's important we don't get that wrong, because if we overcook it and we don't rest enough, if we don't give ourselves enough of a runway there between our final kind of excitement set, then we won't go on to have that knock-on performance. So yeah, it's the time that's really critical here.
And I assume it's, I in listening to that, I think that this is best suited to people who are well trained. You know, that's what the systematic review said. Because you think about it, if you've got someone who's got minimal training and they do, let's say, 3 sets of 8 of some squats, for instance, at 70% of 1RM, they're cooked.
Yes,
they can't. They will be fatigued. They will not cope with that all that well. That's basically their training session. Whereas if you've got a sprint cyclist, for instance, who's competing at the Olympics, 3 sets of 6 to 8 at 70% of 1RM is just a walk in the park. So I think that's something that people should distinguish. Yeah, don't give this to people who don't know, haven't trained much yet.
No, and going back to our last episode where we talked about the new updated guidelines for strength, power, and hypertrophy, like that was all done on a novice population, where the effect of PAP training or trying to manipulate this post-activation potentiation in a novice person that hasn't been trained, they don't need to be sort of worrying or considering about this kind of stuff yet. If their training goal is to, run a faster, 2K or a 3K time trial, or swim faster or run faster, cycle faster, sure. But that's got to take time. That's going to take a lot of work and a lot of sort of things. But so this is certainly, and the whole discussion in this podcast is definitely more geared towards the trained athlete. And we're talking about, the populations I'm looking at coming up are going to be, to at least amateur soccer players. We're talking about boxers. We're talking about middle distance runners, elite middle distance runners. We're talking about a lot of different team sports as well. So yeah, these are trained athletes.
Yep, good.
And I guess just to reinforce that time parameter, another systematic review here by Lee and colleagues published in 2024 was a systematic review looking at how different rest intervals after PAP conditioning influenced explosive vertical jump performance. So this was 21 papers included in this trial, 327 participants, all healthy, trained athletes aged between 18 and 30 that were involved in rugby, volleyball, soccer, basketball, track and field. So yeah, really athletic groups. The conditioning exercise mostly included squats, deadlifts, isometric squats, parallel squats. So squats. Lots of different variations of squats were included as the conditioning PAP. And now this one was interesting because it didn't have our, kind of 2 to 3 sets of 6 to 10 reps as a parameter. The included studies in this systematic review basically just had up to 6 reps only as the conditioning, or the priming exercise, so to speak. But the most important findings here were key in that the timing of the PAP really mattered. So basically between 5 and 8 minutes after the conditioning activity, there was a significant improvement in counter movement jump height. So using counter movement jump or vertical jump as the kind of outcome measure, which often is kind of like what people want to know, like if they're training for a particular thing. And we know counter movement jump and the performance in the counter movement jump has got really nice transference in, we know those that can jump higher can usually run faster. They usually can obviously jump higher. They usually can also too lift a bit heavier. They've just got it's got a really nice it's got really nice meat to having that ability to jump high. It's got really nice applicability. So using that as the outcome measure, that 5 to 8 minute window was certainly better than those that rested less than 4 minutes or less, or 10 minutes or more, 10 minutes or more. So that priming period's really key. So that was kind of reinforced nicely in a systematic review as well. So to kick off, we've got hopefully some nice, strong evidence there. That's quite broad. It's obviously targeted towards really young, mostly male at this stage, trained athletes where we know the PAP effect is real and the intensity of your priming activity, from what we've seen mostly, has been a squat or a squat variation as the priming activity. That seems to be a really helpful thing. How many reps you do, I guess, is up to you and your level of training, but it's that window after you've finished your primary activity that really matters. So less than 4, you're not going to see much. More than 10, we've probably lost the kind of window. That 5 to 8 minute window there seems to be the sweet spot.
How does it work? I'm just trying to think how this can work in practice. I mean, the thing that is springing to mind is, let's say someone who plays Aussie rules football on a Saturday afternoon and they're about to go and play and they do the team warm up, and then I've just listened to Randall and Mick's podcast on PAP, and I'd like to do 3 sets of squats before I go and play football, at some suburban ground at the back end of Melbourne, for instance. It's pretty hard to do that. Like it's like there's not going to be a gym there, kind of like in the change rooms of an away team for people to do that. I totally get it in a training environment, and if you for instance, like you want to go and lift as heavy and do a weight training session, that you can kind of do these PAP exercises to start and then really go for it for sets of 3 or 4. We spoke about the sprinters, where I think that they do their jumps and their lunges and some of the plyometric stuff, which I think kind of works in, but it's not exactly what these studies have said. So have you thought about that too? I mean, as far as the real world application for someone who's running a race at like a middle distance at a track, and for someone who plays suburban football, someone who plays basketball on a Saturday afternoon, if they said, listen, I want to implement this into my program, what would your advice be?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things here. There's also a couple of things coming up too, which might also help. But in this early stage, I think if you're, say, like a sprinter or a middle distance runner, and this is your event, like a soccer game, AFL game, that is of course your event. But where you're kind of, and the same thing for track and field too, mind you, like the magic sort of happens in your training midweek. So like I would certainly wouldn't, and there are ways, and we'll talk about it in a second, but there are ways to get the PAP through your training week that are probably more important than trying to sort of integrate it on game day, competition day. I think there'll be certain athletes that would benefit, like that 1% change would be better, like a sprinter, 100 meter sprinter, really all out effort, trying to get every possible muscle fiber recruiting on game day. An AFL player or a soccer player that's got 90 minutes or 2 hours worth of gameplay coming up, I don't know if trying to sort of simulate it into your warm up or just after you warm up before you hit the ground running, I don't know if that's probably the best way to use it. But also too, there are other ways we can sort of manipulate it. But I think the best thing for people who just generally don't have like the luxury of lots of resources at their training ground or they're at an away pitch or something like that. I think if the way we should be approaching it is try to go after it in your training sessions midweek and do it and time it before a plyometric session. So say like, usually the what you're trying to get out of PAP, and this is what a lot of the studies will look at, is generally a power-based outcome measure, be it a counter movement jump, be it a 10-metre sprint time or a 20-metre sprint time. So it's very speed-based kind of gains that you're trying to get out of it. And so to improve your speed, we know plyometrics work. So doing this heavy lifting, say we're going to do like a squat variation or a stimulus before we do a plyometric session or a speed session where we're going to run run fast for the next, 45 minutes of track work to build our speed, or we're going to, that's probably the time to do it, as opposed to trying to sort of think about how am I going to craft my way into doing it before a game, before I step out on the field. That would be my approach for the general population. But there's also some other simple strategies that we can do it on game day as well.
Okay. And it sounds from the sounds of it that the PAP really, I know you spoke about the physiology at the start, but the PAP, I assume, really targets type 2 fibers. Like it's really about kind of quickness of movement and getting all those type 2 fibers fired up for fast movement. Is that right in my assumption?
Yeah. It's really trying to really target those fast twitch muscle fibers as much as possible, and get that excitement of those higher level motor neurons to try and recruit every possible muscle fiber that's hanging around that we can take advantage of.
Interesting.
So jumping and sprinting athletes. So now we've sort of taken that broad look with the systematic reviews. Now we're going to dive into a couple of different subsets of athletes. So this first one is looking at jumping and sprinting athletes and this is a paper by Beto and colleagues, 2019. This paper looked at 10 amateur athletes with at least 4 years of resistance training. So they're not professional athletes involved in sport, but they've got some training experience behind them. They compared back to our flywheel squats that you brought up and talked about a bit in the last episode. Basically, the group looked at a session where the athletes did a flywheel squats 3 sets of 6 or traditional flyweight squats 3 sets of 6. They then tested over 2 different. So this wasn't head to head. This was one group of 10 athletes. One session they did the flywheel squats. They came back a week later and did the traditional squats. And they looked at sprint performance, in particularly 5 meter sprint performance. And they found that after a 3 to 7 minute window, so they did their flywheel squats, 3 sets of 6, waited 3 to 7 minutes. And there was a bit of a range there. So they kept that consistent. And then they did a sprint test. Okay. And they found not much difference between the 2 different methods. So the flywheel or the resistance training, doesn't matter which one you do, didn't superiorly affect the other. So they both groups benefited, but it wasn't as if flywheel was better than resistance training. I think from a practical standpoint, if you don't have access to flywheel, don't stress. And this is one of those other, if you've got, just a traditional squat and we're going to train you, try to get this PAP response, we can do it with a simple bar or a kettlebell or, a backpack with heavy enough load. The stimulus itself is the important thing here, not necessarily the tool to get there. So, that was good. That was, I guess, a nice reassuring look at, how we can still get the PAP benefits without any fancy devices.
And the second group that just did the traditional resistance training, I assume that had some resistance on it. Like they just weren't body weight squats.
No, it wasn't body weight. It was from 80% 1RM.
Right. Okay.
Loads. Yep. So they improved their sprint performance. They also improved their standing long jump and counter movement jumps as well. Okay. So it wasn't just speed; it was also jumping ability. So there's definitely some wide sweeping benefits here from a power based output, so that you can run faster, you can jump higher after you do this PAP training stimulus. But how you get that stimulus at this stage with a squat, it doesn't particularly matter if it's eccentric overload or a traditional squat. So that was pretty interesting for jumping and sprinting athletes there.
Yeah, good study.
Cool. Now on to soccer. So a field-based cohort. So we've got 14 male soccer players, all college-based athletes, fairly young, 18-year-olds with at least 2 years of soccer experience, and had no previous high level or consistent exposure to plyometric training or resistance training. They did look at how we could incorporate plyometric training or heavy resistance training into a PAP protocol and look at then counter movement jump, 20 meter sprint time. So that was the study's design. The plyometric group did 40 jumps broken up over sets of 10. And then the heavy resistance training group, they did a squat and they just did 1 set of 10 at 90% 1RM. Now, the key findings were counter movement jump improved significantly more after plyometrics. 20-meter sprint time improved more after plyometrics. And it seemed that the plyometric group appeared to create a greater potentiation than the heavy resistance training group in this field base. So this is a really nice, practical response to your question before that looked at probably, the suburban, footy club, soccer club, netball club, basketball club, where, and what can we do if we don't have access to like a squat rack in the background of the oval or the sheds. Here's a nice jumping protocol that can help. So 4 sets of 10 seem to be a really nice strategy here. And what we'll go into a little bit later is it depends on the direction of the jump that seems to be where the best benefits are seen, okay, without giving too much away. So my recommendation, just by giving you this little sort of hint here of plyometrics work, would be to mix up your plyometrics. Like if you're a field-based athlete that's got a mix of both speed in a horizontal plane and occasional jumps, like all sports, basketball, netball, soccer, there's going to be moments where we're all jumping up high and running across. Make sure if we're going to do, say, 4 sets of 10 or however you want to break down those 40 jumps, make sure you have a mix of both vertical jumps and broad jumps in your mix there too. And going back to our previous recommendation of waiting at least, 8 minutes between that last round of jumps before your event, just make sure that quality's there, not too much of a quantity.
That makes a lot of sense that, essentially you just got to train the movement pattern that you want to be explosive and good at. It's the plyos can be a good proxy. What do you think about, essentially, like if you're thinking again about like a basketball player, for instance, in some way, like doing layups and just doing practice hit outs and that kind of thing is a form of plyometric activity. That's usually something that's integrated kind of into a normal warm up. Do you think that the two can be combined, or do you think that there needs to be like a standalone day, like we're, 8 to 10 minutes away from playing now, like let's do our 40 plyos right at that exact moment. And so when the buzzer goes that you're ready to go. What do you think?
I think just rolling in, I guess it depends on the intent and the intensity of that. I think if you're just sort of rolling in and just doing some layups or even sort of just doing some jump shots, yes, that activity is plyometric in nature. The intensity behind it's probably submaximal there too. So if they were like and can dunk, or if you're just on the verge of dunking and you're coming in and you're trying to dunk and you're giving it your all, you probably could integrate that beautifully where your effort is really high. So that would be the encouragement there, is just sort of, take that warm up. Yeah, because these jumps matter and they do count. I would say there's always just probably a little bit left on the table though when you've got the distraction of the team around you, a ball in hand, and you've got these other things that can just take away a little bit from your intent and your true intensity, where you might not be getting your best bang for buck.
I think also that it reinforces that this is something for well-trained athletes, because, when it's been a while now, we remember we did have that episode where we did talk about plyos, and I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but 30 or 40 was a lot, even just for a training session. So even if you're going to be doing 30 or 40 as part of essentially like a PAP or slash warm-up to go and perform, you need to be able to make sure that doesn't totally wear you out.
Yeah. And so remember, these were a group of like really young soccer players, 18-year-old soccer players. Really, yeah. So if you're listening to this and you're like me, kind of, late 30s, early 40s, well, I'm mid 40s, but if you're in your late 30s, early 40s and maybe weekend worrying still, and you're all of a sudden picking up this kind of information. I remember from your last podcast on the parameters for strength and conditioning, there was 24 was the number of plyometrics or jumps. I remember the number of being 24. 4 sets of 6, that kind of like, gives us that kind of rough kind of ballpark. What is the 24? Yeah, my quick maths is still there. 24. So that's usually the sort of prescription for most power-based things. That's how I'd normally prescribe a series of jumps in the clinic to someone. 4 sets of 10 is definitely on the higher side of the prescription from what we've sort of seen and what you presented last week. But the group here is very, very different, much younger, and also probably a little bit more trained than what we were talking about last time.
I have to say that I've never been able to dunk or never on the verge of dunking either, Mick. So it's
You and me both, mate. It's you and me both. Still never too late. Never too late, I hear.
It is too late. I have to. So at the age of 51, and being just under 6 foot, like I got no chance.
Fair enough, man. I'll keep trying. Moving on to something a little bit slower in I guess, athleticism, but middle distance runners was an interesting paper I found where PAP was used in a bunch of 12 trained male endurance runners, and they used band resisted squat jumps as their PAP stimulus prior to a 5 by 1K time trial.
Right.
So it was a 1K time trial. They repeated 5 rounds of it. They basically did a series of four sets of 5 jump squats using a resistance band. Mm-hmm. They would then rest there 5 minutes and then go off and do a 1K time trial. They would then come back, rest again, and go off again. So they only did 1 round of this 4x5 jump squats, but they did a 1K time trial 5 times to see if there was any benefit. And the benefits were quite interesting. And this was compared to a control period. So there were no two groups in this. This was only one cohort, but they came back and tested them a week later. Now, compared to no PAP and no resisted jump squats, the run time improved when they did the jump squat stimulus by 3.6%. And then their 1K time trial, so the accumulation of the 5 1Ks and the times it took to improved by 3.6% overall. And their best 1K time trial improved by 8%. So the PAP before a middle distance 1Ker is nice and effective, and also, once again, practical. We're doing jump squats right before, and yes, and they use resistance band to do their jump squats to add a little bit of extra overload and a little bit of extra stimulus. And yeah, they ran faster. So it's not only just for sprinters, not only for power-based athletes. We've seen some benefits in our middle distance runners too, and our anaerobic beast. Sorry, aerobic depends on how far they're running, I guess, in their middle distance. But yeah, interesting look.
I like that. The thing that springs to mind also with that type of protocol is swimming. And you see often like the elite swimmers will get their bands and they'll be doing very quick kind of movements. They'll be doing rotator cuff work. They'll be doing stuff to activate the muscles around their scapulae, and they actually looks quite forceful. And I always thought, gee, this seems to be a little bit more aggressive than maybe what I would naturally have kind of advised someone to do. But no, I think that it's exactly the same thing as what these middle distance guys are doing also, is just using the resistance band, doing the 4 sets of 5, waiting the 8 minutes, and off you go. That's significant result. 3.6% is a huge, on someone who's well trained. That's incredible.
It's a big jump. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's it's nice to sort of see the benefits extend beyond just our power-based athletes. So moving on to the last 2 ones, we're looking at ergogenic aids. I won't spend a lot of time here because it's just, I think we've already sort of got the idea that the PAP effect the PAP effect is a real one. It's very advantageous to use, seemingly without having to need to dive into like the gym just quickly to knock out a few squats or deadlifts or bench presses before we go and do our sport. Like, we can easily get the benefits in jumping, that plyometric benefit before we do our thing seems to be quite beneficial. The 2 last ones are probably just adding that little cherry on top in people who already might be at the top end of the pointy end of the spectrum, where if you've got the tools and you've got the little bits of gear, then maybe these additions might be worth throwing at you as well. But certainly not for the everyday novice athlete, and not worth the time and energy spent in people that probably aren't even doing this as a whole. So don't go in for the cherry if you don't already have the ice cream or the rest of the cake already, the pudding already done. So this one was the addition of blood flow restriction and a weighted vest. quite a different addition to just the plyometric jumps. So 15 athletes from mixed sport backgrounds with at least 7 years of sporting experience. The study compared blood flow restriction and plyometric jumps, so 3 lots of 15 to 25. So doing the plyometric jumps with the blood flow restriction gear on, a weighted vest plus the plyometric jumps, with the weighted vest being 10% of the body weight, and the plyometric jumps were 3 lots of 15. Then the third group was BFR plus weighted vest plus plyometric jumps, and they looked at sprint performance. So all methods improve the sprinting, but the combined group of BFR and weighted vest had the largest effect on the 20-metre sprint time, and it improved 20-metre sprint time after their rest period by nearly 4%.
Whoa.
Yeah, so a big jump in sprint time if we want to just really fire up that muscle. Get those lower limb muscles cooking before you go and do your 20-metre sprint. So that was a really interesting one. That one, sorry, I didn't give the author's name before. That was Selick and Ergogenic, 2025. So that was that one. Lastly, caffeine as an additional PAP tool by Zhang and colleagues, 2024. They had 25 highly trained male boxers and with at least 4 years of boxing training and low habitual caffeine intake. Now, they had a control group, they had a PAP and placebo group, and they had a PAP plus 3 milligrams per kilogram of caffeine. They then, all 3 groups, had to do a 10-second all-out cycling effort of the Wingate test before their testing. And so basically what they found was that the caffeine group had a nice, very subtle and simple benefit. Not small. It wasn't. They didn't give any percentages here. It was just. It was significant, but only a small significance between or over the other two groups. It's just a nice additional tool, and we talked about caffeine before, how it can really fire up a lot of athletes in their speed and their sprinting and their endurance. Whether or not this is a very small study, whether or not it's just let's just basically put everything into caffeine and have it. I think a lot of athletes these days will be having caffeine tablets anyway. So I don't think this is hugely groundbreaking research, but it did show that when you did sort of have that little hit of caffeine before a PAP protocol, it did enhance an anaerobic test in boxers. Anyway,
that makes sense. I'm surprised that the most surprising thing about that paper is that they weren't very caffeine tolerant. I mean, who doesn't drink a lot of coffee these days? So finding the right people there would have been a big challenge. But anyway, we know caffeine works, and we know PAP works as well. So putting the two together, for sure.
For sure. All right. So that's the kind of breakdown of all the papers. A couple of take-home points here. Remembering that this discussion here was on trained athletes, mostly male, and all mostly under the age of 30, like all the included studies here. So it's very limited to a very small subset of athlete. This isn't a kind of old. Yes, we probably will see benefits in our older weekend warriors. We absolutely would see benefits in females. It's just that at the moment in these study designs, they're very underrepresented as unfortunately as usual. So it would be nice to see some more female-based studies and see what the effects are there truly. But I think importantly, the numbers here and the protocols here were really aimed at and delivered in a way of the young, healthy, trained male athlete mostly. So just consider that too in dealing with the person sitting right in front of you, and you're looking at devising a protocol to help your specific athlete that's right in front of you. Jump performance seems to be the best outcome measure where PAP has been shown to be beneficial. So if we're in the gym, we're looking to either do squats to improve our squats prior to a plyometric session, or if we've got a jumping test or we're about to do a whole heap of jumps for whatever reason, or if we've got to do a whole heap of squats before a sprint session or whatever it is. Squats and plyometrics tend to be the two kind of PAP stimulus, but the best effects, obviously, as I said before, jump performance tends to be the more consistent improver over sprints. But of course, we've seen some papers where sprints are improved as well. So all types of athletes, jumping and sprinting athletes, soccer athletes, middle distance athletes, boxers and anaerobic athletes tend to sort of get the best bang for buck here. As I said before, the the direction. If we're going to do jumps as your stimulus, your PAP stimulus, make sure you mix it up. Don't just have vertical jumps only. Don't just have broad jumps only, looking for maximal height or maximal distance. Break it down, probably have an even spread of 2 sets of 6 to 10 horizontal, 2 sets of 6 to 10 vertical. And that way we're ticking all the boxes there. Last couple of things, you need to dance nicely here with fatigue and performance. If you don't have the adequate rest even after your sets. So if we look at 2 things here, we've got our PAP stimulus here, our 2 to 3 sets of 6. We need to make sure we've got adequate rest periods here between our first 6. Then we need to wait at least 5 to 8 minutes. And the longer you wait, up to 8 minutes tends to be more beneficial. After 10, we're probably losing our window as well. So there's a couple of things there that really need to be considered. So we're not fatiguing our athletes. Okay, we can't do this PAP stimulus and absolutely fry and cook the athletes that we're dealing with before they actually go out and perform. So yeah, they're probably the big ones there. Don't overcook them. Make sure you have a mix of jumps. And I like the jumps. The jumps tend to be the more practical thing that you can take anywhere, anytime, be it loaded or unloaded. Obviously, squats and deadlifts and derivatives have been shown to be beneficial, but the ability to get them done before your event or your testing block is just going to create some barriers there. So it seems like the jumps tend to be the more transferable PAP exercise.
Yeah, I also, just a follow on from that, kind of take home messages. I like your comment and point about that it doesn't necessarily just have to be when you're about to race or compete. This can be done before a training session to maximize that training session and your performance within that training session. Because surely if you're maximizing every training performance, when it gets to performing for real, whatever you do, like all that bank of good training has got to pay off as well. So yeah, great points, mate.
Yep. Nice, mate. Well, that's it for today. I enjoyed that one. Thank you. Thanks for listening. And
no,
thanks for being my partner in crime as always.
No worries. I enjoyed that one as well. So why don't you read us out?
That's a wrap for this episode of Exercise Matters. If you enjoyed the chat, make sure to subscribe, leave a review and share it with your mates. A quick disclaimer, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical or individual advice. Please always seek guidance from a health professional for your specific needs. A big thanks as always to our sponsors, Remax, high performance skincare for high performance people, and Learn.Physio, world-class education for health professionals. We'll see you next week.
See you next time.